Oh my gosh, we're back on the What She Said Project podcast. I am so excited. It is 2021 now. We're in January. I have no idea what it's the 8th.
It's the 8th.
And I have a very special guest today. My very special guest is my friend Caitlin. We have never met in person. We have only met through the wonders of the internet and through some really badass. I'll just go, okay, we're gonna cuss a little bit on today's episode. I will have said this before, but we're gonna say words like badass through some really badass coaches. And through that community, we've hung out for like, I don't know, like a year and a half.
Yeah, it's been a little bit.
And you've been through some really fascinating changes. But before we go any further, I would love to ask you, how would you like us? Tell us what you would like us to know about you today.
Oh boy. I know that you told me that you were going to ask me that, but it is still hard. So I am Caitlin Fisher. I'm the author of The Gaslighting of the Millennial Generation, which started as a blog post, went viral, and then I turned it into a book. So it is now a whole real book, and that still doesn't feel real to me. And I am also a coach. So I coach on confidence or writing or starting a business or job seeking. I have sort of a very varied background. And as Shannon mentioned, we met through coaching. So along the way, you just sort of pick up a lot about coaching. And I realized, people were coming to me for advice a lot, and I could turn that into something. So
yeah,
I write a lot about trauma and boundaries and healthy relationships, and I coach about it too.
Love it. So at the end of our podcast, or as people are listening, please do not write while you're driving your car. We will find out how Caitlin wants us to follow her, because there's some new stuff coming out. She's releasing, I'm like watching this thing evolve, like the coaching practice is getting more and more. Anyway, I'm just excited to share you with folks. And spoiler alert, Caitlin almost didn't want to do the podcast. And this is why she's here. This is why they are here. So look, I've already done it. So one of the reasons why the What She Said project has had like one audience that's like kind of side-eyeing us is because of pronouns.
Yes.
Now, as a X and as a millennial is in the room, one of the most important things that I know I want to get better at, like 2021, it was in 2020, it's in 2021 continuing. I want to get better at using folks' pronouns. And I've already moofed it up today. So Caitlin, bring us into the conversation about pronouns and why they're important.
Okay. So as alluded to, I have a non-binary gender, which means that I don't identify with the binary of you're either male or female. Yep. So I use they, them pronouns, which is a neutral pronoun, rather than she or her. And non-binary can encompass a lot of things. You can feel maybe in the middle, and maybe sometimes you feel more male or sometimes you feel more female. It can be completely outside the binary. You can feel like you don't have a gender at all. You can feel like you vary between two genders. So non-binary really it's an umbrella term that encompasses anything that's not strictly man or strictly woman as that binary, because we humans like to put stuff in boxes. Yeah. We don't tend to love gray area, and gender being a spectrum and a mix of societal implications, gender roles, and just the way that we feel about our own selves, bodies, identities, and minds. There's a lot going on there, and it doesn't all fit neatly into two little boxes.
No. So, okay. So, did you write about this in the book?
I did, sort of. So it's hilarious. There is a chapter on gender in the book. So each title or each chapter title in my book says millennials are killing such and such. So there's a chapter on millennials are killing the American dream, and millennials are killing the economy, and millennials are killing traditional relationships. And then there's one that says millennials are killing gender. And I just want to say right off the bat that gender identity and transgender issues did not begin with the millennial generation. We're just the ones who have sort of started making a large internet fuss and starting to fight for more visibility and things like that. Now, there are transgender people from all generations. There are transgender and non-binary gender identities from all sorts of cultures. So when we tend to get frustrated, like, oh, but I grew up and it's male or female, like that's what it is. Like, you're erasing some indigenous cultures who have always observed non-binary gender identities and things like two-spirit and other gender identities. So there's a whole lot to unpack when it comes to gender. And then the funny part is when I wrote the book, I was identifying as cis female. And so in my gender chapter, I'm like, I am a cisgender woman.
You would change your voice just then.
I am straight passing. And I'm like, I'm not, I'm very queer coded. Like,
okay.
But so I'm talking, because I try to like unpack my privilege at all times. And I'm like, I'm a cis woman. And, I just want to like bring about this discussion about gender. And now I'm just like, oh, I'm not that.
Tell me more. So back it up. When I first met, I've had short hair for a long time and I've been a boss lady my whole life, but I'm an actor. And so I kept a certain hair length and wore certain, even though I would play antagonists, and I have a strong energy and I walk with confidence. And so folks have made that mean whatever they want to make it mean. And I had a friend said, are you aware that you're queering the gender? I had no idea what any part of those words meant. So for people that are new to some of the words, and there's still a lot of them out there and they're my age and older, tell me what cis means.
So cis is an adjective prefix, just like trans. So trans means you identify with a gender other than the gender you were assigned at birth.
Okay.
And cis means that you identify with the gender that you were assigned at birth. So that's all it means. So if you were born and they said it's a girl, and now you're 40 and you still feel like a woman, you're cis. And if you were born and they said it's a girl, and then you get to age 31 and you realize nothing about me makes me a woman, and I don't really perform femininity the way people expect of women. So what's the point of being a woman? Maybe I'm non-binary.
Perform femininity. Ooh, we could have a whole nother podcast about
that. Yes. I will come back as long as you need me to just
we will need more of this. Yes. What she said, we are evolving.
Yes.
And
you'll do a monthly podcast called That's What They Said, and that's just the one I'll be on.
Oh, I love that. Okay, done. Everyone, you voted. I felt it. Done. So, okay. So you said, let's see what else you said that might be new to folks. You said that you identified as cis, hetero, and then you said a word called passing. That sounds like a sport word, sports, and I don't know.
It does. Okay. So when I said that I was hetero passing, I mean that I'm bisexual, which means I date and I'm attracted to more than one gender. So I like people of my gender. I like women. I like men. I like non-binary people. Any gender, I can be attracted to you. But I primarily have dated men. And I look very feminine. So if you look at me on the street in a couple, you may think that is a straight couple. So that is, we talk about like straight passing privilege, as opposed to if you are visibly queer in a queer relationship, you may be discriminated against in public. And it's not a privileged position. So being openly queer and publicly queer is a marginalized position.
So
being straight
Privilege.
passing affords me some privilege.
I'm having lots of conversations this week about what privilege. I guess we're just going to keep touching it. So privilege, meaning that you clearly appear to fit within the dominant cultural narrative and expectations of, we could name all the things. So that's
Yes.
privilege. And then the way you're talking about it would be like hetero, like heterosexual, and so no one has to be concerned. You're not doing anything different. And so they don't feel like they need to do something to harm you, which is often what we see, discrimination or
Right.
other acts of
What
violence.
would be even more privileged is if I was in a relationship with a white person. So my partner is Black. So there is a bit of that is like a marginalized thing. So you occasionally get like looks in a grocery store of like, oh, what's she doing with him? And I'm like, well, first of all, it's they. And secondly, like, mind your business. And it's,
Yes, because it's outside of the dominant narrative of they have the same skin color. Yes. Male,
yes,
female. Yes. Okay. Dominant cultural narrative. So if you veer, then there's a possibility. That means you're, whether you recognize it or not, you're a part of a marginalized community. Am I still going on the right track?
yep, you are on the right track.
Okay, good. I've learned something this year. Okay. So then you said some words called queer coding, and you and I got to have a little quick conversation that was very fun and lively on your Facebook page. Tell me more about coding. Well, it sounds like a web design.
Yes. So so the term coding is often used in the media, such as like queer coding a villain in a Disney film or something like that. You tend to notice that villains in movies tend to be sort of effeminate men, perhaps. They maybe appear a little bit queer or gay. And we tend to
It's new
villainize.
to me. I'm like,
It's news to you? Okay, you definitely want to look up queer coding villains.
okay. Homework for next time.
Homework.
Hey, look, we're learning things today.
There's
And
also a lot of biphobia, which is
yes.
related to homophobia, but is specifically anti-bisexual in the media, because bisexuals in the media are coded as cheaters, because, oh, well, I want to be with anybody, so I'm going to cheat on you because you're not what I want today. And it's bisexual people can be monogamous or polyamorous, and it doesn't mean that they're bad. So you often see like bisexual characters in media doing a lot of cheating or being otherwise sort of sneaky and shady.
I just got the queer coding of villains, and I just like my brain began to bring up stuff, the fear around, yep, and that's what we've seen in the media, which especially like I'm not going to go into it, but we know like in the 80s and 90s, there were lots of victims of, movies about queer men who had, did terrible things, movies about them. So then I think that fed the fear.
Mm-hmm. And we also see some transphobia in the media as well. Ace Ventura being a great example. Did you see the first Ace Ventura movie? Like many, many moons ago?
Yeah.
So like the bad guy in that movie is, quote, pretending to be a woman. And there's this huge climactic scene where Ace Ventura reveals that this woman character has a penis, and all the guys who have kissed her throughout the movie start barfing and gagging. And it's very much trans people are villains, they're lying, they're deceptive. And that feeds a cultural narrative that we don't realize it's feeding. And that being that trans people are, for some reason, lying about who they are and being deceptive. And that puts them in danger because people will harm them based on that cultural narrative that they may not even realize that they have that bias.
Yeah, implicit bias is so sneaky. I mean, it's in all of us. And like and when we're tired or stressed, it pops up, not maybe that one, but we've got all of this like cauldron of, not to vilify a cauldron, but all this stuff that we're not even aware of. And that just connected me to the research I'm doing about the distrust of women. our female identifying folks, like the distrust of Eve goes way back. And
Mhm.
I don't know, we could have a PhD on this. Okay. So bring it back to your, if you don't mind,
Sure.
your lived experience of recognizing that you were saying and identifying one way, and then there was a shift since we met.
Yes. Okay. And I apologize for the sirens
Hey,
that
real
you can
life.
probably hear. I live on a pretty main road. Um,
In what town again?
I'm in Cleveland, Ohio.
I love to remember that every time. I keep saying Atlanta. Nope, Cleveland,
Nope.
Ohio.
Nope. Melanie's the one in Georgia.
Yep.
Where are you?
Columbia, South Carolina.
Okay.
I know, right?
We're not Georgia. Not
No.
responsible for our blue wave. Okay. So back to my experience. So I was identifying as a cis woman. You know, I hadn't really explored my gender because I was always just like, well, you know, like I know I'm not a man, so
Yeah.
I must be a woman because I was thinking in that binary.
Yeah.
And I had long before I met this friend, I'm going to tell a story about a friend. But first of all, I'm going to tell a story about the fact that I quit shaving my legs somewhere around like 2013 because I was like, this is weird and performative and it doesn't matter to me. And I stopped shaving my legs. And my mother like got really on my case about it. And sometimes I didn't wear a bra. And it was like, you don't look right. Like you're not performing the look that you are supposed to have. And she said that my legs looked Amish or like I had man legs or like all these things. There's so much wrapped up in just shaving your legs. And I had opted out of that. I was like, I don't want to buy razors. I don't care about the hair on my legs. Nothing bad has happened. I didn't shave my legs and a rocket didn't fall on me out of the sky. I think it's fine. And, you know, I only wear makeup when I feel like it. Or, you know, sometimes makeup makes me feel like more confident. Or if I'm going to do a video online, I put on some makeup and then I immediately take it back off because it makes my face itch. And I'm not putting that on for other people. And if it makes my face itch, I'm going to take it off. So the way I sort of explore my gender identity and my gender presentation, you know, I'm not feminine for other people when I have a more feminine day. Like that's just how I feel that day. And a lot of the times I'm just in like yoga pants and like whatever. Not that yoga pants are, that's
Yeah.
honestly, I don't mind a she, her
Yeah.
as much on a day when I'm in yoga pants. But if I'm really dolled up, I'm like, it is they, them, and you will remember.
Yeah.
So it's almost like the more energy I put into my appearance, the more I'm feeling connected to being outside that gender role.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Oh, it's fascinating. I also am listening as a person raising a child who has been raised to know that she's supported in exploring whatever it is that's going to be, right? And so I'm curious. Okay, I'll tell you a story. I've written about this. I'll release this essay again. You would think with this presentation that I would not have had an issue with her cutting her hair. And I did. And it took until the pandemic. And finally, she looked at me and she said, I want my hair your length. And I said, no. And do you know what that was about? Fear. It's not fear of how she present, it's fear that she'll get hurt. And so as I was watching you talk about your mom, I was like both holding both spaces, right? Because my family would wish I would have maybe more hair. I don't know. At my age at this point, I'm just like, leave me alone. But at her age, I was like, middle school is going to be terrible. And she has such luxurious hair. It was me. It was all me. It was all my attachment. And so one day, with all of her thick curly hair, I took her in the backyard and I said, okay, we're not going to a hairdresser. We're not going to a stylist. I'm going to cut it. And I did. And she was so much happier. And what it did in our relationship is later it allowed her, and this is her story, not mine, so I will not tell it for her. It allowed her to tell me some other brave things. And I'm like, and that's me. So I don't know. I just feel like there's something about hair, and there's something about like when we're parenting the next generation, like recognizing where I'm afraid for her. She's not afraid. She's like, I don't care. And I'm like, but it's her struggle muscle. That's my therapist says. Your child has a struggle muscle just like you do. And exercising it is not going to hurt her. In fact, it could help.
Awesome.
I know. Strange story about hair.
No,
Okay. So walk us into, okay, queer coding. So what does that mean for folks that aren't, maybe folks don't know what the word queer is because our generation, the X's and above, didn't use it the same way, I think.
that is true. So queer was used as a slur against gay, bisexual, trans, anybody outside the cis heterosexual norm. And that is now a reclaimed slur. So some LGBT people don't use it and they still don't like it, but it has been reclaimed. And so many of us use it to describe ourselves. So I would describe myself as queer. That's easier than saying like, oh, I'm non-binary, but very feminine and I'm bisexual. Like sometimes I can just be like, hi, I'm queer. Like, and it covers whatever bases I need it to cover. And so there's a lot of ways to discuss like the queer community, the gay community. A lot of people just say LGBT. Some people would just say like the gay community, but gay tends to imply male-male relationships. So gay men, lesbian is woman. And then we don't have all the time to get into it, but you can be a non-binary lesbian. There are bisexual lesbians. So there's some overlap. And so because of all the overlap, queer can be a really great word because
warming up to it.
It gets the point across without needing to go into like a thesis about your specific sexuality.
Which actually is kind of nice.
It kind of is definitely nice. So you can definitely say the queer community. You can say queer people. I just wouldn't use it as like, oh, well, the queers said this. Like that's probably not the best way to use that term. But you can definitely talk about the queer community and queer people.
I'm curious about, well, many things, but I'm curious about one of the observations has been that millennials talk more about their sexual partners than X does. And so, where a lot of, just from my personal watching and noticing, like more of my millennial friends are very open about talking about all the things. And that's like what they lead with. Do you know, like, is that something you've identified, or it's, I think we discussed this. So tell me more about.
I think that makes sense because I think millennials are big on destigmatizing. So you'll see a lot about people talking about their partners, talking about kink openly,
Yeah.
BDSM,
Yeah.
sort of just destigmatizing these things that we've always sort of thought of as behind closed doors. So, and I think that destigmatizing benefits everyone.
I do too.
You know, anybody should feel free if they want to share about, you know, I'm part of this community. Like you should be able to, like, obviously don't like go into graphic detail with somebody without their consent because consent is important in your sex life and also like just all the time. Like you need to make sure people are up for a conversation that you're having.
Yes.
So I think millennials, and especially talking about like polyamory or open relationships, you know, experiences that they've had in abusive relationships. I know I talk about my abusive marriage a lot because being open with that has destigmatized it in my own social circle. I mean, I can't say that I have changed the world, but I have changed a small corner of it. And a lot of my friends, specifically women, have come to me and said that because I talk about my abusive relationship so much, they realized they were also in abusive relationships and they were able to leave.
Yeah.
So I talk about pretty much everything. I talk about my mental health, I talk about going to therapy, I talk about being medicated. I
Yeah.
talk about if I go and get my annual exam at the gynecologist, because we should be able to talk about things freely. And I think that's very millennial culture.
Yep, I agree. I think there's a lot that my generation will notice is more healthy. That, do you know, like the talking about it is the thing. It's like secrets fester in the dark. Do you know? So I don't know. I love the millennial generation.
I
Um,
do too. I wrote a book about them.
no. So your book for folks that, let's say that they're in the workplace and they're noticing that there's sort of like there's a communication gap or there's like a discomfort and they want to, they're not ever going to be as cool as millennials are, but they want to have better relationships. They have a millennial that they love. Buying this book would be very good for them. Yes.
I think that this book will help anyone, especially like you mentioned, older people in the workplace, so a Gen X or baby boomers who work with millennials,
Yep.
because you will get a really good insight into what they want out of work and maybe how they operate and their values. So
Yep.
what we used to see in work, and there's of course a chapter millennials are killing the workplace,
Yeah.
because how could I not? We also have education.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, I didn't get sliced cheese into the book, but apparently we've also killed that, even though it's still doing fine.
I think it would
But
be a great leader. By the way, I'm just like, my brain was like, this would be a great class for leaders. Do you know, like a leadership class on how to work with millennials, like how to motivate?
I think that would be so useful,
Oh
because
my gosh.
the old way was, you get like an entry level job, you put in your time, you get a promotion, you put in your time, you get a promotion. Like baby boomers could stay at the same job
Yep.
until they retire.
Yep.
They started in the mailroom and then they end up being a VP.
Yep.
I mean, not everybody, but enough people that it's like a trope. Like, oh, well, we can just put your husband to work at the company, like in Gilmore Girls or whatever. And millennials don't do that. They don't. I think the boomers think of it as loyalty, like
Yep.
the company line, like the company is the most important thing. And millennials come in and they say, no, like my wellness
Yes.
is the most important thing. And my life and my values and the world outside of me are more important than your company.
Mm.
So I sent a work related email today and got a reply that said, hey, we don't work on Fridays. Like, we'll see you Monday. And I was like, I love that boundary, that, that holding of my time as sacred. And I have done that with bosses in the past where I'm like, I'll get a text on Saturday afternoon. Hey, I had like an idea I want to talk out. Do you have time today? And I'm like, can I wait till Monday? And you just keep sort of putting down that boundary. And I think millennials putting down a pretty basic boundary about protecting their personal time
Mm.
comes across to baby boomers as rude.
Mm.
And it's like, no, like I'm protecting me. Like I can't give all of me to you. We already live in a country where we're not getting paid enough and we don't have health care and like all this. And like you also want my Saturday? No, it's
What
my
I'm
Saturday.
seeing, I'm seeing how, like in your coaching services, how powerful it would be to learn how to set boundaries to reclaim your life and work
Yes.
balance from a
And
millennial.
I focus a
Oh
lot
man.
on boundaries. So whether it's boundaries interpersonally, like I've ended friendships that, I kept saying like this thing is happening and I'm uncomfortable. Like, can we adjust this thing that is causing an issue? And can I would like to receive an apology that like takes accountability for this thing that you did that hurt me. And this friend of mine continually would not apologize, wouldn't adjust the way he was treating me or anything. And finally, I was like, okay, like I have to move on from this. This is no longer a healthy relationship for me because you're not respecting a boundary that I communicated. And I'm a I will tend to give several chances, but the older I get, the less chances I'm giving out. I'm just like, no, like cross me once, maybe cross me twice. Like I got to get out of here because you're just going to keep doing it. So I talk to my clients a lot about boundaries. And even if we coach about writing, we often end up on boundaries. Boundaries with yourself. I had a client who was just working and writing constantly, and she was so committed to this word count goal, but she's also in school full time and she's also got kids and a husband. And I'm like, you're off on Fridays and Saturdays now. Like, you have to take time off. And she did that. And when did you know that she felt a lot better and got her work done during the week and was able to prioritize because she knew like Friday at 4, she was done for at least a couple days. So you teach people how to treat you, but you also have to teach you how to treat you.
Mm,
And we tend to expect so much more of ourselves than we expect from other people.
true.
So I am big on boundaries, and bosses have not always liked that about me.
Were bosses of like a boomer generation, or do you think just bosses in general need to catch up with the world?
I would say it depends case by case. So I just got a job offer today.
We're celebrating.
And
So they are lucky and smart to have hired you, because I
they
know.
are lucky and smart.
Yeah.
And I also feel lucky because I had a really good full-time marketing job and I quit it over the summer because the boundaries weren't respected and it was not echoing my values as a person.
Mm.
And I didn't really have a backup plan. And I know that that is super, super privileged because I had the means to just walk away from a job, and very few people can do that. So I realized I was super privileged in that. And then in the meantime, I've been able to get some freelance contracts working with nonprofits, doing work that really like fuels me and fills me up. And those have been part-time, paying enough to meet all my needs and pay my bills. And so I've been able to put more energy into my coaching business and launch a whole new brand. And I feel like I'm really killing it right now.
I know you are.
And that's because I said yes to myself
Yep.
and I said no to a $71,000 a year job.
And I'm hearing how clearly you said yes with work that you love, and how it's paid off, and it will pay off financially. Do you know, like, leave that. But I like, for people who do work that they love, I've witnessed it. They just are like become like a supernova, and it just begins. Another skill I noticed that with the boundaries, now I'm thinking of all the ways we can work together. I am fascinated by asking for money in coaching, at like, how do we put out offers that align with our values, but also pay enough so no one feels salty at the end of the day about it.
Mhm. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's hard. And I'm still honestly self-coaching on that
Yeah, me too.
and working on that because I know that I need to charge full price and that probably even my full price is undercharging,
Right.
right? Like full price. So um I also see I'm a complex because I also want to be accessible. And I know that people have varying budgets and still need help. So like I want to have something I can offer at different price points so that I can help as many people as possible
Mhm.
without feeling like, no, like you don't get access to me because you can't afford it. That hasn't sat right with me. So, I do resumes professionally. And so I've started implementing a sliding scale for that.
Mm.
So now I've had people pay me between $35 and $100 for a resume. And it's wherever the price point that's comfortable for you is. If you're somebody who can afford $100, you'll pay me that because that's what it's worth to you.
Because you could get a job that you're making 90, 120. I mean,
Right. Right. And giving that scale makes me feel good because, and I have also offered, I said, if you're out of work because of the pandemic, I will do it for free because that is something I, in a privileged position, can offer people who have become underprivileged. you know, they don't have the income. Like if you need to choose between like feeding your kid and paying me for a resume, I'm just going to do the resume.
Yeah.
And then I have this sliding scale, and the people who can afford to pay me $100 are offsetting those sort of pro bono pieces that I'm doing. So that's all a complicated way of saying that my pricing system is not totally figured out yet. And
I
I'll get
believe that it will be. And I love that you as a boss can make all the decisions. Do you know? Have you ever had someone walk away from your offer that was a good fit because of price?
I think so. So I teach a course called Level Up Your Boundaries. The
Oh,
first round was called Level Up Your Trauma Recovery, but I feel like boundaries can apply to trauma recovery, but also apply to your everyday life. So I think that trauma word was turning people off. So level up your boundaries. And I was offering it to people, specifically my friends, because like that was like the group I was in, and people had watched me turn this into, you know, I did it as a workshop about a year ago, like a year ago this week, I did it as a workshop and then turned it into an online course. And then I ran it with, I think like I had 6 or 8 participants.
that's good.
And yeah, it was awesome. And I got great feedback from them. And even on that, I was like, okay, like let's do sliding scale. Like, tell me what you can afford. And some people walked away not because I want this, but I can't afford it, but they said, I want this, but you deserve for me to pay you for it. And
Yeah.
they couldn't afford it that way. So that hit different. That wasn't you're charging too much. That was you deserve to be paid for your labor. And I'm not there right now.
Oh, what they valued it higher than they could afford, what they would want to pay you for it.
Yes.
Oh, that's fascinating. Okay, you know we're going to have to come back a month from now and have more discussion.
I'm so happy to do that.
Thank you for being, we're here. So before we go, would you tell us how folks can find you? And then I'll make sure it's typed up. So when people look at the show notes, they've got that information. So how can we follow you, find you, buy your book, read your stuff, all the things?
Excellent. So my book is, you can get it anywhere books are sold, but Amazon helps me because then when you go leave a 5-star review, which I need you to do because I'm an independent author, it's verified and that just has a little bit more weight. So I despise Amazon
Yes.
because of capitalism,
Yeah.
but I cannot argue with the fact that it exists and everybody uses it.
Yep.
So buy my book on Amazon. It's called
Okay.
The Gaslighting of the Millennial Generation. And you can find me at CaitlinFisherAuthor.com and at Caitlin Fisher Author on both Facebook and Instagram.
I think we'll just consider this a takeover. Would you accept that as an olive branch for any time I have misgendered you? I would just like for once a month for you to take over, and we'll just change it to be what they said. We can make a new logo. Love it. Is that, will you do that with me? I would love, please be a contributor and please take this olive branch, what they said. We'll make it.
I love it so much.
Oh my God. Me too. Thank you for being my guest. Thank you for all that you're doing in the world, and you're showing up and you're showing other people how to show up. You're showing me how to show up better. The work is important, and we're so glad to be in your community.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited. I'm glad I finally was like, can a they be on your show?
Of course, and I couldn't figure out how to do it, but it just had to be, look, change, here's what I know. Change happens in relationships. And that's why we bring folks on that we're in relationship to the podcast. So you can see us be brave and ask questions and like get in there and then with consent. So thank you for taking us into all the places. There's more coming. So in a month, you'll be back. Yes? Is it a done deal?
Absolutely.
All
Yes.
right. What they
Scouts
said
on
over. All right.
So in the meantime, if you're getting a lot of questions about the queer topics, the gender topics, just put them in a document and we'll hit a few questions every time I'm on.
Perfect. I love it, y'all. Caitlin. See you in a month. Have a great weekend. Bye, y'all.